joining us on this panel are Sudeep Chakraborty, Principal and Head of AI and Gen AI at Axtria. Then we have John Tucker, Director, Enterprise Data Governance at McDonald's. We also have Diego Diaragao, Senior Vice President, Balance Sheet Management and Analytics at Citi. And this session will be moderated by Oz Dogan, President and Co-founder Americas at Blend 360. So let's keep the energy going and give our panelists and moderator a really big round of applause.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great conference, and congratulations to all the award winners as well. So excited to kick off our panel discussion about scaling AI beyond POCs. I know there was another panel discussion earlier today, sort of similar kind of orientation, but obviously this is a topic I'm sure that's it's a hot topic for a lot of the folks out there. So we have an amazing group of panelists that are representing a variety of industries, and as we go through this, we'll keep it real, practical stories, real life stories that would hopefully benefit the broader audience here. But before we get started, I wanted to set a little bit of context, and then we'll jump into the discussion. And so with Gen AI and agentic AI and AI in general, obviously we're all excited. There is, from my perspective, I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, and I really look at it as the biggest technological advancement of our lifetime. And Andy Jassy from Amazon CEO, he calls it once in a lifetime opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of excitement, and with that excitement, what we see is a lot of organizations jump in and they want to test, they want to experiment, they want to run POCs. And what we're seeing is in the industry, 80 to 90% of these POCs fail, according to a recent BCG study. 74% of the organizations report that they struggle with creating value with AI. So that's one side of the spectrum. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have companies that have been able to generate tens of millions of dollars of impact, maybe more. We've actually been fortunate to work with some of them in the past. So those are kind of the two sides of the spectrum, so to speak. So what separates the companies that have been able to scale value through AI versus the companies that are struggling? That's really what we're going to get into in this panel discussion. And we'll talk about some of the critical success factors. So with that, let's jump in. And John, I guess we'll start with you. And I'd love to kind of get your perspective based on your experience with McDonald's or your vantage point, what you see as the biggest systemic barriers that really prevent organizations from scaling AI.
I think, and hopefully you guys can hear me, I think, the biggest barriers that we see is that poor data quality. I think everybody sees that when you're starting out on that type of initiative and use cases. Having good data quality, but also not having practical data governance in place prior to jumping into it. So as you think of, data policies, as you think of classifying and profiling the data, those things need to be there. But also, it's also about taking the business owners, the business stewards through that journey with you so they understand the use cases, but also as you think of adoption, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later on, it creates better adoption around those use cases.
Yep, awesome. I guess connecting to the data and technology, from your perspective, what technical or architectural decisions made during the POC process, in your opinion, have the biggest impact on scale and value creation?
Yeah, thank you. So I agree with, first of all, what John said about data. I think it's very important to get the foundations right. And that's true for technology as well. I think one key thing is flexibility, because the space is evolving so fast. nobody really knows what technology you'll be using next year. So having a modular approach makes it much easier to swap in, swap out, and scale as you grow. If your POC is successful, moving on. The other thing that I was just doing a review of a project with my team, and one of the things that we noticed is that in cases where there was no plan for load testing of different components, it caused issues. It took longer to scale than if you actually took the time to do some load testing of different components up front. It's a hard balance because on one side, most people want POCs to be quick and dirty, so to speak, just get something up. On the other hand, then it becomes much harder to scale if everything is quick and dirty. So it's like really making that decision about both flexibility and having components that can scale. Those are really important, I feel, in addition to data. And the one thing I would add to the I guess, overall foundations part is really having a strong security and compliance component as well, because it's very hard to scale if you don't have those practices in place.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, if I can build up on that, and hopefully you guys can hear me well. I think the background's a little bit low here, so it's been difficult for us to, I guess, hear each other. So if you guys in the PA can just turn the volume up a little bit here in the stage. But perhaps to bring some context, in my role at Citi, where I lead the data and insights team for our balance sheet management group, is this team within the CFO organization that manages our $2.6 trillion balance sheet from the perspectives of capital management, liquidity management, interest rate risk management, in general, managing our assets and liabilities in a way that ensure the safety and soundness of our firm foremost, but also, try to optimize and make the best use of those scarce financial resources. In this position, we are also trying to build AI-enabled use cases, but first trying to ensure that we have the right foundation, right? That we are spending the time and resources to, ensure the data quality, the data observability, the data management overall is there, because I guess as practitioners in the industry, all realize that any AI, any model, right, by definition, is garbage in, garbage out, right? In the sense that if your data is not reliable, if your data is not good enough, if you didn't invest time and money, of course, in building this foundational data management architecture, this foundational data landscape, is very difficult to make informed decisions and unlock the real value-added insights, right? So that's a constant, tension that we, in one hand, are of course pressed to deliver on the investment we're making and ensure that we are unlocking the more kind of modern, cutting-edge use cases, leveraging AI more specifically, but also at the same time ensuring that we are not only investing, but also remediating a lot of some of the legacy data quality issues we have across our data ecosystem, right? So I hope that adds value to this.
Yeah, that's great, Diego. And I know, John, that data governance and data foundation is also one of the areas that you're focused on as well. So I'll have to also get your perspective as you sort of operate across the McDonald's kind of ecosystem, and how do you see data foundation and data governance play into the sort of like scaling AI topic?
Yeah, I think it all starts with, the things you said as far as the data foundation, having proper data lineage, having data quality, having observability in place. But I think for AI, you have to have the proper business context with the data. And that's where a lot of our focus has been, because as you start to have engineers start using the data, trying to figure out what the use cases and how to solve those problems, they also have to have proper context. And so where we believe is that making sure that the business is involved in every step of that journey, not only having a business context, but the ownership over the data, looking at the data quality and monitoring it so we can ensure that the outcome of that use case is successful.
Yep, that's good. And obviously you guys are also sort of managing a sort of fairly complex matrix organization that has a lot of dimensions. So I'm sure that is also contributing to the complexity of the solution. Diego, I want to come back to you, and as we think about value creation, and I mean, ultimately, one of the key sort of, I guess, requirements around scaling AI is being able to demonstrate that AI is, or the solutions that we're building with AI are creating impact, financial impact on the business. So how do you sort of think about measuring that value? What are some of the best practices that you see there, or some of the approaches that you used in the past?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question, right? And I think I acknowledge I'm part of the financial services industry, and in our firm, we're probably very oriented towards ROI, right? And we have, very, I guess, sophisticated and consistent methodologies to assess ROI, but not necessarily the traditional, I guess, more tech development oriented type of ROI. Frameworks are suited to assess the real value of investing in those kind of more foundational data management, data governance, I guess, going back to my previous point, initiatives that do not necessarily have those obvious ROIs in the short term, right? Because sometimes you need to invest on those that, according to whatever investment prioritization framework that your firm adopts, probably not going to rank at the top, but sometimes you have to go through that journey to ensure that you are putting the time and effort and resources into those kind of more foundational stepping stones type of projects and use case that are going to really enable you to unlock the more value-added, cutting-edge, modern type of use case that really, I guess, going back to my previous point, really require that you have your data management, your data foundation, your data platforms, in place, and ensuring that you have the data quality and data observability and data management, data governance also in place to be able to then go to the more kind of sophisticated use cases.
Yeah. And to add to what Diego was saying, one of the things we have seen, and we work with over 100 clients, and I personally have engaged with about 50 of them over the last 2.5 years. So what we are seeing is that organizations, before they get to the ROI, they identify, and we work with them to identify, early indicators of, is it likely to actually lead to the kind of business impact that organizations are impacting. And one early indicator is actually adoption. What does their adoption trajectory look like? And that's important to decide as you're looking at your POCs, MVPs, and production rollouts, is that which ones have the trajectory that's likely to lead to value, because without adoption, you're not going to get value. With adoption also, there's a good chance you'll get value. So an early indicator is really your adoption trajectory. And I think that's an important metric to check and evaluate and see how your respective POCs and MVPs are doing.
That's good. That's a good point, Sudip. And this sort of is also connected to the change management topic as well, which is also one of the critical success factors. And we were about to start an AI automation project for one of our customers that happens to be in the manufacturing industry, and the company, the CFO, is the executive sponsor for the new AI solutions, because a lot of these automation solutions obviously have big efficiency gains for that company. And one of the things she said as we were getting started was one of the biggest critical success factors of their project is going to be to ensure that the engineers who've been working with that company for 30 plus years and were sort of set in their ways in terms of how they're running their process, their ability to actually adapt and use the systems that are being deployed. So with obviously the adoption topic, change management topic is really super critical there. So John, what is your perspective there as you guys roll out some of these AI solutions at McDonald's? What have you seen work as best practice for change management?
I think, from a change management perspective, one thing that we do is we have these human-centered design thinking sessions. And typically what you do is you have, your tech teams and your business teams come together and figure out what problems or challenges are you trying to solve. And I think by doing that, especially as you look at AI use cases, you want them to scale and you want them to get that adoption, is really taking the business along that journey with you. Because as technologists, we're really quick about solutioning and figuring out the problem for ourselves. But when you embed the business with that, they're the ones that are ultimately going to be that voice that carries that through the business and why we should use and leverage some of those use cases.
Got it. So, if any other best practices that you've seen there or methods?
Yeah,
that-
absolutely. And I want to sort of, change management is critical. I want to take a step back and talk about adoption in general. And I think change management is a critical part of it, but so are at least 2 or 3 other things, right? So the organizations that we have seen scale the most, they follow these practices. One is, especially regarding change management, this actually is planned for right up front, not after the product is developed. The concept is that you build it with your users, not to your users, right? So having champions up front that are actually working with you to define what the solution will look like is really important. So that's one. I think the other part to what John was saying is the user experience, the human-centered design. I've seen the companies that actually spend their time do it, really drive adoption much faster than ones that do it later or only after something doesn't happen. So I really want to emphasize the importance of that. And the third thing is actually, especially in GenAI, is like accuracy, right? Because if you cannot trust the output, then you're not going to get the kind of adoption you need. So while change management as a practice is important, I think the overall thing that you have to worry about is adoption, and that requires all these 3 or 4 different things. And when the organizations that spend a lot of time upfront thinking about these and planning for these, we've seen, to borrow a phrase from what Oz was talking about earlier, is like the go slow to go fast. So initially it might seem that, oh my God, we are spending so much time on thinking and planning and not doing, but it really helps accelerate the productionization journey after the initial few weeks or months.
Yeah.
So I really want to emphasize that.
And the only quick thing I would add, and probably goes without saying, right, but better highlight that, is that no change management around any topic, and AI included, gonna happen without senior management sponsorship, right?
Yeah.
Because even though it's a hot topic, and I guess naturally and organic, there's some momentum coming from folks kind of on the trenches, developing the use cases and identifying the problems that AI can solve, right? If you don't really have a coordination and encouragement, I guess, from the top of the house to ensure that the investments, the resources, the priorities are being really kind of stacked against all of these multitude of use cases kind of coming into the pipeline. If there's no senior management support, I think it's difficult really to achieve
Totally,
this
just
change
want to add to that. In fact, in the morning, one of the presenters had 4 ways that these initiatives can be led, and I think the number 1 was CEO led. And I think that at least what I have seen is that that's where there's the biggest chance of success. So the organizations that are really scaling, they're not seeing GenAI as something, okay, let's do it on the side and hope that some of them work out. They're saying this has to work. Let's do whatever it takes to really drive success. And that's why this whole enterprise approach is an analogy to it takes a village. It takes a whole enterprise to really drive success in a lot of these new initiatives. Because apart from the technology, you need obviously data, you need security, compliance, you need UX, you need change management, it's product management. It's really a whole enterprise approach that's driven from the top that at least personally I've seen gain the most traction in terms of going beyond proof of concept.
Yep, it's good, Sudip, and it's actually interesting that one of the comments you made about go slow to go fast, and what we see a lot in the ecosystem is the tendency, we all get excited, right, about the use case, and let's go tackle it. But spending a little bit of time and really not talking about turning it into an analysis paralysis, because we all want to go fast and use an agile approach, but do a little bit of planning around some of these areas around data foundation, governance, change management considerations, really allow organizations to go a lot faster in later stages of the process.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing, while there is all these foundational aspects, the technology part is one. Getting back to what we were talking about earlier, is evolving very fast, and nobody knows the answer. It doesn't mean you get locked down up front, but I think it's some of you may have heard the classical concept of diverge and converge. So first, you do have a set of experiments that are going on that need to go on in technology to figure out which ones are going to make work for your situation. But then at some point you got to decide, okay, whatever the information we have to converge to something that's going to be at least usable for the next months, quarters, maybe even years, although that's unlikely right now. And that way you do experiment, but you need to be able to get to some kind of decision, however imperfect it may be, so that you can at least move fast beyond the first go slow phase.
It's good. The other area that I wanted to also cover was the operating model and the organizational model. And what we obviously see in the industry, there are different models. There are AI, COE, centralized models. There are federated models, and there are hybrid models. And Diego, obviously being part of a large organization like Citi with lots of divisions and regions and so forth. And what is your perspective there? What have you seen kind of work? What are some of the pros and cons of different operating models?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to the best of my knowledge, most of the large firms such as Citigroup, which I'm part of, are adopting this hybrid model, right? With AI COE, usually within the CD organization, kind of coming up with the standards, with a set of tools and capabilities that are uniform and centrally governed across the firm, while within the business units, within the functions, there are those federated units, such as mine, developing the use cases and try to tailor-make to the extent possible those enterprise solutions to solve the specific needs and problems within those organizations, right? The constant tension and challenge is the fact that, in one hand, there's this effort from the AI COE to ensure that everyone is following the standards, that all the guardrails are in place, and everyone is respecting and complying with the enterprise central governance and framework, while teams kind of in the front line, they have some more specific needs. They sometimes want to partner with specific vendors to implement some more specific tools and capabilities into their tech stack. So there's a need for some central coordination and really some cross-pollination between the federated teams in terms of how to adopt the best tools, how to eventually leverage efforts made by other federated units in bringing tools and capabilities in-house in a way that this difficult balance to be struck is achieved, right? Of course, it's probably easier said than done, but a lot of the time and effort that we spend is, ensuring that we have the leeway and we are doing things that are applied to the context that we live with, but also meeting all the central enterprise regulatory risk and management and controls frameworks that ensure that we're doing things in a safe and sound way.
That's great, Diego. Jen, I'd love to get your perspective as well. Obviously, McDonald's is also a fairly complex scaled organization. So what is your take on kind of the ideal operating model, what works, what doesn't work, and some of the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think, we have a hub and spoke model, so very similar to what Diego was mentioning. It's more of we build the capability at the center, put the right foundation in place, the platform, making sure all the standards are there, all the policies, the procedures. That way, when you're working from a local point of view, let's say Germany or the UK, they have all of those things there, but they can start to build out for their local use cases. Now, there are often times where there's great ideas across our organization, and we from a global perspective or corporate perspective, we may not know that someone built something locally. So what we're doing with that is making sure that as a part of that framework, from a central point of view, we're building a catalog that captures all of those use cases, no matter if they're from a local point of view or from a corporate point of view. So as you think of what's been built before, there's not going to be a lot of rework. There's mostly reuse, taking those same use cases and seeing if we can reapply them to other things.
It's great. And
If I can just expand on what Diego and John said, I agree with them. The hybrid model is the hub and spoke. Those are the pretty standard ones. Just one thing to add there is that this also seemed to morph, right? Like some years, the central is stronger, and in other years, the spokes are stronger. So it goes back and forth. I do want to, when we talk about operating model, I want to kind of go a level deeper. And what we are seeing, for example, in successful builds is that there are three kinds of teams that are pods, as some organizations call it, that have been really successful in innovating, developing, and industrializing Gen AI, LLM, and agentic AI applications. And the ones we have seen typically are the ones that are most successful one is innovation pods. Those pods are just focused on innovation, like trying out new APIs, LangGraph, Crew.ai, Pydantic, whatever. Then you have the industrialization pods, which are actually, their job is to scale. And the third is the reusable assets / foundations pod. So the whole idea is that as you start industrializing one or two use cases, you identify reusable assets that you then bring in a common format that's accessible to other use cases. So that's one way that you can achieve a flywheel effect, which means that every new use case, you get like a common set of services or microservices that every new use case doesn't have to build, and you get a playbook as well. So that way, the growth in use cases might be linear, but the cost and time is actually sublinear. So you're changing how efficient and how productive your whole model is in terms of build. And then finally, once you've stabilized, you get these operating pods as well, which are not for build, but for maintaining and things like that. So that's another thing that we have seen, which is once you've decided on this hybrid approach, is sort of going the next level. How do you organize your technology teams and your product management UX teams so that you have this flywheel effect? Because the whole idea is that you don't just do this one time, but you really change the trajectory of how technology is developed and used, and the business impact it creates. And this is one way that we're seeing has been pretty successful.
Awesome, thank you. That brings us to our last question, keeping an eye on our time here as well. But I'd like to ask our panelists about what is one actionable principle or practice that organizations should adopt in order to scale AI. So what is that one thing that you would really say this is the one thing that they should focus on as they think about scaling AI? And maybe Diego, we start with you.
Perhaps at the risk of sounding like a broken record, is really ensure that you're investing the time and resources and focusing on, getting your data platforms, your data management, your data foundation in order. Because, even though as data leaders, we are being pressed to showcase value and ensure that we're not kind of missing the wave and not as similar to some of our peers delivering and launching the more modern, cutting-edge use cases. Sometimes by cutting corners, you're not really unlocking any value. You're just kind of propagating biases, propagating data quality issues that already exist and probably would be more helpful in the longer term if we were to shift the investment towards those more foundational use cases rather than, just build a nice chat that talk with your clients, but is just providing crap insights, right? So.
All right, Sudeep, how about you?
So I would have just two words: get started, right? There's obviously with the right set of guardrails, data foundation, data quality, data governance, but I think the important thing is to get started. That's what I will end with.
Right. Yep, that's good. How about you, John?
I would say, develop an enterprise-wide AI literacy program. and just get everyone educated on the power of AI, how it's more of an enabler, and just ensuring that people understand how to use and trust it.
Awesome. Great. So we have, I guess, a minute left. So if there are any questions, we could take a question. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, I'm Nitin, and I have two questions. So, in most of the enterprises or on the banking, financial service, or retail, I work with the execs. So, typically, what happens is that they reach out to their internal teams to come up with the use cases, and there is a thing called enthusiasm among all that we need to do this, 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 this. So, how you manage, or how do you do pass the message like curb your enthusiasm for AI use cases? That's part one, because everyone wants to do something or the other, and they think that their use case is the best among the all. That's part one. And what's your take on implementing open LLMs versus closed LLMs in your ecosystem, whether it's banking or retail or any other sector? So those are the two questions.
Perhaps I can take the first question,
Yeah.
given that I guess it's more specific to financial service. I guess the nature of the industry that we are part of, that is heavily regulated, and by definition requires that we meet certain, criteria or certain requirements, such as, the whole fair lending set of regulations that really require that whatever credit underwriting decision being made, that we have all of the observability, that we're able to show which filters are driving the decision. I guess that by definition, and problems shouldn't be like this, but in reality, I think that's what ended up happening. That by itself ended up curbing the enthusiasm of a lot of, folks kind of in the front line, coming up with ideas, coming up with the use cases, because after you start, trying to consider all of the risk and controls aspects around that specific use case, then those issues kind of come up to life, and okay, maybe there's a set of use cases, perhaps more oriented towards augmenting the capabilities of our teams. They're not very client-facing, but they do add value. Maybe that's where we should focus on the limited investment that we can make, right? So I don't know. Hope that answers your question.
I can talk a little bit about healthcare. So we have a wide range of clients, and we have some where they actually are very conservative. So there's only one or two use cases they're willing to go, and then the highest number that I've seen personally is 800 use cases, which to me at least was a very large number. And the way to manage that and moderate that is really you have to put your selection and prioritization criteria. It's like, what is the value it'll generate? What pain point does it solve? What is the intensity of the pain point? How frequently does it happen? So once you have that criteria, a lot of these ideas will get filtered down. And of course, then there's a cost element. How long will it take? How long will it take to build it? How much is it going to cost, and so on. So when you have over enthusiasm, I think this was discussed in one of the earlier panel discussions or speakers as well, that having that criteria, the set of criteria that can filter only the ones that are likely to generate value in a reasonable amount of time, having that criteria is really important. Now, the second question you had is about LLM, open versus proprietary, so to speak. So at least the organizations that I work with, which are mostly large pharma, some medium and some small as well, a super majority of them are actually using OpenAI. So that's the super majority. There's some that are experimenting with the other models like Claude, and there's a few that are experimenting with Gemini and Llama also, which is like a downloadable. But that's not very common. By and large, people are more comfortable with the guarantees that Microsoft and that environment provides. So that's the super majority by far. Does that answer your question? Sorry? Do you have the mic? I'm talking about life sciences. Yeah, not everyone, of course.
Yeah. And I guess just to kind of add to that, across other industries, the answer is usually it depends. I mean, it really depends on the specific use case. It's not just the open source versus closed source, but even like with closed source, do you use large language models? Do you use small language models? And the way we think about it is for every task, you have a different tool. and it's about optimization because there are different price considerations and cost considerations and complexity and inference time and so forth. So they all sort of come into play. And then from a value creation perspective, or the prioritization perspective, the value, and you touched on it as well, Sudip, it's so critical. And also the alignment, because what we see a lot is, like you said, a lot of different folks across the organization, they get excited, they come up with use cases, but you prioritize it, but then how do you then also get everybody in the room to then just kind of ensure that they all see the same thing from a prioritization perspective. So that alignment, the workshopping, we've seen that as a best practice in that process.
Great.
All right, the other questions?
Yeah, this is Murali Kashubaina here. I do have two questions. You mentioned about ROI, even though I'm not a big fan of ROI because it's a heavily loaded word. Is ROI defined before conducting a POC or POT, or is it defined after conducting the POT or POC? That's my first question. The second question is, what kind of readiness you're seeing out there in terms of IT organizations? The reason I bring it up is because in one of the earlier panels, I think it was Rama who brought up a very interesting perspective in terms of how IT organizations can be overloaded with the higher expectations from coming all the way from the boardrooms. But in terms of the readiness, how do you see IT organizations getting ready to not only support the legacy, keeping the lights on, but at the same time meeting up to this newfound, ambitious expectations? So those are my two questions.
Yeah. Which I can answer the first, and then we can talk about the readiness as well. So the ROI calculation for a POC, it's very hard to go through a very comprehensive, thorough ROI calculation process, right? So we've done it in a couple instances, but there was more for the rollout phase where we're going to deploy team of 40 people, 50 people are going to build this big system. In that case, obviously, you have to be very precise in terms of what the expectations are for ROI. For POCs, it's really more the hypotheses and really an estimated approach around what the ROI expectation is. But at the same time, though, quantifying that is critical, right? Because without that, it's really hard to kind of justify the investment that you're going to make in it. And I don't know if there's any additional thoughts there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that goes back to the point I made when we were talking about ROI a few minutes ago. Is that really dependent on how, I guess, flexible or how comprehensive maybe your ROI framework is in a way that captures not only the immediate, I guess, short-term benefit, financial benefit, and even the not tangible benefit of the initiative, right? Because, to my point, a lot of those use cases, a lot of those POCs, they kind of build towards, other use cases that are only unlocked by first going to those more foundational ones, right? So we have to make sure that your ROI framework captures this intangible value that is not necessarily reflected in the bottom line of the P&L.
So I can tell you about the life sciences world. As you'd expect, there's a wide range. Some are, still getting started, while others are actually kind of almost chomping at the bit to really build this POCs, MVPs, and these bigger solutions. One thing actually some IT organizations have going for them is that they actually have been, a lot of them are investing in using GenAI and agentic applications for their own code development. So they're actually, they're often, at least in many cases, they're actually familiar with both the opportunities and some of the risks of using GenAI, at least for their own work. And so what we are seeing is that some IT organizations are pretty sophisticated and willing to really engage in building and implementing these large-scale solutions, while others are still pretty cautious in terms of how do they even get started. So it's a range, but there are some IT organizations which are really forward-thinking, I would say, and experimenting and trying out a whole range of new technologies that are coming up.
Yeah, what we generally see is as we sort of talk to work with different companies is there's a talent and expertise shortage, right? And some IT organizations, they have it, but it's not at scale. And part of the challenge is things are moving so quickly right now. I think that been mentioned a couple of times, like the innovation speed is so high, so hard to keep up. And even if you're trying to upskill the talent and kind of build that expertise, everything is moving very rapidly. We're not talking about agentic until 9 months ago. Now it's all about agentic, right? So now there are new tools available out there. So it's very hard for a lot of organizations to keep up with it. But generally speaking, we see a shortage of expertise and talent in the marketplace.
It's a very different question. As a volunteer, I teach at many colleges and universities on AI data cloud. And the most common question I get is, if everything is done by AI, so what is a career we should pursue? Now, it's a very different question from what we've been discussing. So what is your take on that? So in our days, when we were young, most of us started developing C, Java, Python, and all that. I know Python is the mainstay for everything, but then if everything is done by automation, so what do you think the students should go for so that they can make a career in tech or something? I just wanted to hear your perspective. I know mine, but I wanted to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go first and you guys have it, but it's a little bit philosophical question. I appreciate the question.
Yeah,
and,
this is a very important question, and in a way it's actually personal to me because I have a son who's about to graduate and he actually asked this kind of question.
Yeah.
Right, so my view is that some of the real core human skills are going to be needed no matter how much automation you do. And those are things like, I think, critical thinking, communication, creativity, empathy. I think those are the skills that are, at least that I can see in the foreseeable future, will continue to be important. So even a career in tech requires you to imagine how, maybe you have a different workforce with agents in addition to people. How will that entire workforce work together, right? So there's the need for imagination and creativity. I don't think, AI is nowhere close to addressing that. So I think that's going to be important. Critical thinking, we've seen plenty of examples where, ChatGPT comes back with things that are just not correct, right? There's a lot of hallucination, and there's a study that says the more advanced the models, the more the hallucination. And so I think one has to really be much more deliberate about employing their critical thinking skills in many of the situations. And I think those are going to remain important. Things like communication, ability to communicate with humans, those things are, I don't think AI is fully ready for that. I think they may still take care of some of the things. I think one of the top uses for ChatGPT is companionship, is what I hear. So I think ChatGPT and OpenAI and AI can take over some of those, but I still think people will still need communication, community, and things like that. So I don't think those are going away, at least not in the near future. So I'm pretty optimistic, frankly, that there'll be better need for actually truly human skills than for, coding is great. I started my life as coding, but a lot of this is actually repetitive, right? There's no reason why Cursor or somebody cannot do a lot of that. So that's my view.
And one quick thing, realizing we're very over time here, but there's the whole, if you look at any AI governance framework, right? There are things such as explainability, accountability, and one that you're always going to see present there is human on the loop, right? Because for a lot of use cases, especially the more mission critical ones, you still need that person not only to design the whole journey, not only to design the whole experience, but also to vet and have that human touch in the decisions made by the AI, right? So I think that's why humans, at some extent, will still be needed. I hope, at least.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're at time here. So thank you all the panelists for an amazing discussion here, and thank you all for listening.